Call ourselves to order. Got a couple people missing, that's fine. We'll start out with approval of our agenda for the day. You have that before you. Do that by consensus. Is there anything we need to change on our agenda? All right, hearing none, we can consider that approved. Next up will be approval of our July 13th meeting minutes. We will take a motion and second from people who were present for that.
I made a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion from Monica. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, second from Tess. Thank you. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. See a light. I don't know if this. Oh, it is. Okay. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting. This is for anyone to address the commission on items not on our agenda for the day. Emmett, did we have anyone register this month?
We did that.
Okay. Then we'll move on to our first business item, which is a long-range plan amendment for Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park for the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. Go ahead, Colin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. No council member here today, but I am Colin Kelly, as Mr. Chair indicated. I'm a planning analyst. I'm here to present the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment on behalf of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I should note that we do have some park board staff here on hand this afternoon, and they can help respond to some questions after the presentation as needed. The Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park is located near the center of the Regional Parks and Trails system in southwest Minneapolis. The focus of this plan amendment is on what's known as the Loon Lake Trolley Path and a parcel located at 1699 West 34th Street, both of which are on the east side of Bede-Makaska. The amendment represents a minor revision to a long-range plan approved by the Council in 2017, which focused on park and trail areas associated with Bede-Makaska and Lake Harriet. The two subject parcels were inadvertently excluded during the 2017 planning process for Bede-Makaska and Lake Harriet, but were included in the Park Board's more recent Southwest Service Area Plan. That plan was adopted by Park Board Commissioners in 2020. As mentioned, we're talking about two small additions to the Chain of Lakes boundary. First, at just over an acre, the Loon Lake Trolley Path is a narrow strip of land that used to be the route of a Minneapolis trolley line. The parcel rises in elevation as it travels northward from 36th Street, eventually reaching the top of the bluff at 34th Street. It averages about 50 feet in width and includes considerable slope down to East Bede-Makaska Parkway. The parcel is currently owned by Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Second, at 2/10 of an acre, the parcel at 1699 West 34th Street is an unusually shaped parcel surrounded by parkland and public right-of-way. It is the parcel outlined in red in the figure on the right side of this slide. This is figure 3 in the staff report. This parcel is currently in private ownership. It is also the focus of the next business item, which will be taken up after this one. Taken together, these parcels would add 1.23 acres to the existing 489 acres of land in Chain of Lakes Regional Park. The proposed addition is approximately 1/4% of the existing land area. Over 20 years ago, in 2001, representatives from the East Calhoun Community Organization, or ECHO, sought to preserve the alignment of the Loon Lake Trolley Path for recreation, while also improving the trail, calming traffic, and increasing pedestrian safety. Fast forward about 18 years or so, and the City of Minneapolis staff participated on a technical advisory committee and reviewed proposed park improvements, new park proposals, and parkland expansions during the Southwest Service Area Plan process, which included the Loon Lake Trolley Path. Not long after, the Park Board of Commissioners approved the Southwest Service Area Plan in November 2020. This service area plan codified the inclusion of the subject parcels and the vision for them in policy. Resolution 2020-310 is included as Attachment 1 to the staff report. From a public engagement standpoint, I'm able to report that neighborhood residents engaged, quote, fully and robustly in support of the vision plan for the Loon Lake Trolley Path and were the catalyst to include it and the parcel at 1699 West 34th Street in the regional park boundary during the Southwest Service Area Plan process. That plan was created after nearly 2 years of community-based engagement, planning and design with individuals, neighborhood groups, and community organizations throughout Southwest Minneapolis. The document represents the final recommendation of the Southwest Parks Plan Community Advisory Committee, which met 16 times over 18 months. The kind of elevation change that exists on the Loon Lake Trolley Path and at 1699 West 34th Street is unique around Bede-Makaska, and the development concept takes advantage of the topography with overlooks, interpretation opportunities, and nature play nodes. The figure you see here is figure 4 in the staff report. A soft surface trail would continue to traverse the parcel, connecting 36th to 34th Streets and offering a substantially different experience than the paved trails adjacent to the lake. The development concept focuses on preserving the somewhat more remote and naturalized feeling of this linear park space while enhancing safety and access. At each end, enhanced wayfinding and gateway features will clearly mark the trail as a public facility. Habitat and view protection are goals of the regional park system, and these parcels would contribute to the protection and enjoyment of Bede-Makaska. The Loon Lake Trolley Path is currently owned by the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Therefore, there are no associated acquisition costs. The 2023 market value of the parcel at 1699 West 34th Street is $926,000. The Park Board is pursuing a Parks Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for the future acquisition of this parcel by a separate but associated business item. Coming up next. The total estimated development cost associated with the plan amendment is $534,742. Together, the estimated acquisition and development costs associated with this plan amendment are $1,460,742. The rationale for proposed action is that the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Long Range Plan Amendment is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Policy Strategy 1 around plan requirements, as well as other council policies such as those found in the current Regional Development Guide, Thrive MSP 2040. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I stand for any questions or comments you may have.
Great. Questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chair and Colin, you said there were, I think, like 16 or 18 community discussions in the process of this being considered. Is that right? And you said it was robust and they were enthusiastic about, so the resulting community attitude was positive. Is that what you're saying? I wasn't quite clear what you were saying. I couldn't read the fine print.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, the 16 meetings over 18 months was a reference to the Community Advisory Committee for the Southwest Service Area Plan that was developed by Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. That plan included the Loon Lake Trolley Path, which includes the 2 parcels that are proposed to be added to the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park boundary as a result of this plan amendment. In addition, the neighborhood surrounding the park has shown a lot of support for this addition as well.
So what I didn't hear you say, the result of the 16 meetings was enthusiastic support for this? Is that what you're saying? Or are you not saying that?
I'm saying there were two different, excuse me, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Muller. There were kind of two separate things taking place. First was the development of the Southwest Service Area Plan or Master Plan, which includes a lot more of the southwest part of Minneapolis than just the Loon Lake Trolley Path. But that group ultimately supported this work, which included the Loon Lake Trolley Path. And then specifically to this work around this plan amendment, in the addition of the Loon Lake Trolley Path and this parcel, the local neighborhood robustly supported this this amendment, this addition to the regional park property.
Thank you.
Looking in the report stuff I have in your presentation, so we have for the boundary adjustment, it's an addition of 2 parcels. And we have a diagram showing the parcel with the home on it. I don't think I see a diagram that actually shows the trolley path parcel, the extent of it. Do we have that somewhere?
Mr. Chair, Emmett is just sharing the same graphic that I think you're referring to. The Loon Lake Trolley Path is immediately adjacent to the one you're talking about. The 1699 West 34th Street parcel is highlighted in red.
Is it this space right here?
It is indeed, yes. It's immediately adjacent and running parallel to the parcel, north to south.
Okay, and the description said between 34th and 36th. So is 36th that away?
It is indeed, yeah. 36 is on the south end of that map, and 34th is right where this parcel sits on the landscape.
Okay, so I think mostly what I was getting at with that is the parcel we're talking about including for the trolley path piece is what was immediately adjacent. We're not talking about what appears to also be a retained right-of-way up between the houses further up.
Mr. Chair, that portion of what may have been the Loon Lake Trolley Path previously is not included. It's the area that's depicted in the green coloration immediately adjacent to the parcel at 1699 West 34th Street.
Okay. That answers my possible follow-ups. Any other clarifications?
No.
Can I ask, when was the fire?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Buska, I believe that the fire was just this year in 2023, this spring, if I'm not mistaken.
So are there any conversations about what will happen with that land? It was obviously a house, so is there going to be essentially the foundation going to be reconstructed and turned into something new specifically for the parks in the community, or is that going to be a cost that needs to be thought about in terms of digging all of that out and rehabilitation with the space? Or have there been any conversations about that with the community?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I can share what I know based on a recent site visit to the location. The house has been removed in its entirety from the parcel, and the property has been cleaned up to essentially a level space that's covered in essentially natural vegetation at this time.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
I think part of that, besides the possible cleanup consideration, there's the question of basically why to include that parcel. And it's kind of in an awkward location where it starts to get included if we have the trolley path piece, but it doesn't necessarily need to be within the park just for that reason. So the development concept talks a bit about some of these sort of pieced off amenities, but doesn't directly address how that affects this parcel. Is the plan in the amended development concept that particular parcel itself would host one of these either overlooks or play nodes or something like that?
Mr. Chair, that is the case. Yeah, they're intending for a few different amenities along that Loon Lake Trolley Path and the parcel, the subject parcel, to include some nature play nodes, overlooks interpretation and potentially some public art to be included along that entire pathway and this parcel included.
Are there any other clarifications, or does someone want to move on to a motion and discussion?
I'd move to approve the resolution.
I second.
So we have a motion and a second, sounds like, for the proposed action from the staff report, which is that the Metropolitan Council approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment. Discussion on that motion.
I'm sure at this point, we don't know who is gonna do the art and historic interpretation opportunity, right? Because you say the city and non-profit groups. We have no idea who those are.
That's a good question, Mr. Chair. We've got some staff from the park board here.
Sure.
Who could
Pull up on
join
either
us.
side of Colin here. State your name and position for Sam's notes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Colin. I'm the Senior Planner Landscape Architect for Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. And we have been working already with the neighborhood organization. They have some historians in their group that are helping us come up with the signs and the photos.
Thanks.
Other discussion? I think for me, the trolley path part of it is pretty much a no-brainer. That's right there. I'm a little concerned about the cost of the other parcel and how much benefit we get. It's a little hard to envision that, but it's kind of hard to put that into the bigger perspective of what else, because I don't remember all of the extent of what this park is and all of that. So it's just something for people to think about. Certainly could be worth it. I'm not necessarily saying I'm opposed, but it is a relatively high price tag because of the location of this parcel, so we have to think about that.
Also, it's not exactly the best time to buy anything, but I think it's a great opportunity to extend the view. And if it's high like that, I can see like very nice overview. So
Yeah. Well, and I do want to clearly, the actual purchase part is a separate business item. There's that within the boundary adjustment phase. We're just looking at, yes, there's a estimated acquisition cost. Whether we buy it today or 10 years from now, it's the same as anything else. Kind of parcel of that. But yeah. Anyone else?
I'd say the opportunity to keep it as a natural space, like, wins for me in terms of overprice tag. Just kind of keeping it from being developed again and turning into a private space or a private lot again.
And this is much more your neck of the woods than mine. Are you more
Yeah, I
familiar
grew
with
up
how
in
this
this.
space looks?
I grew up around these lakes, so I know exactly where we're talking about. And those lakes, specifically Bidemakaska, is such a diverse community that frequents those lakes. And I think supporting that community and supporting adding natural spaces to that area is just a plus for me. On a personal note. But.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention that Colin gave our staff team a tour of this site
Cool.
after the house had been leveled, and there are mature oak trees on the property, and the views of the lake are unlike other parts of the park, just because there aren't places where you're up on the bluff looking down. So it is a much different experience. That was my reflections from it. So, for what it's worth.
And I know, obviously there are some bigger areas where we have more of the development of the park, but outside of those, for the bulk of it, is most of it kind of this narrow in terms of between shoreline and park boundary? Is that pretty typical? Or is this a more constrained area than most?
Chair, I'll just repeat from what I can remember from my walk, is it's really fascinating because the old retaining wall from the actual trolley way exists today, and so that bounds the property to the east, and then the base of the bluff is basically east Bidemakaska Parkway. So it is that band that runs the length of the property.
Mm-hmm.
That's my memory. Colin?
Mm-hmm.
No, it is a very unique site, like totally different than when you're on the other side of the lake, if I don't remember wrong. Like this is pretty unique.
I feel like I want a topographic map of this park. Sounds like it's interesting.
Just
It would be a great place to watch a sunset, because Minneapolis has a great area for sunsets, and that area is, I mean, it would be on that side, it would be beautiful.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so our motion on the table is still just the one from the staff report. Sounds like we're ready to move on to a vote on that. All in favor of that motion as presented, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Then it will move on to our second thing, which is also for Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for the Ruddick property, Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. We have Jessica now.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to present the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, the Ruddick property for Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Like a lot of this will be a little bit of repeat, but for anyone watching later on, it might be helpful. Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park is located in southwest Minneapolis and is the highest visited regional park in the system. The 1,500-acre park encompasses 5 lakes: Lake Harriet, Ruddick, Lake of the Isles, Cedar Lake, and Brownie Lake. The Ruddick property is shown here in red on both images. It will become part of the Minneapolis boundary. The 0.2-acre property is partially wooded with many mature oak trees. There is no longer a home on the property as it was recently destroyed in a fire and has been removed. I wanted to include a few photos that we took on our little field trip so you can get a better idea of the property. The one on the left shows the trolley path, and the property is really quite long. I can't quite tell from this photo, but it goes back quite a ways. And then the two on the right show the lake view. And once the area is cleaned up a little bit for better vegetation management, you'll get a really phenomenal view overlooking the lake. So the total project cost, the property was appraised at $1.25 million, and the seller has agreed to that amount. The total cost is $1,285,000, and the total grant amount will be $964,125, and Minneapolis will pay the required 25% match. Our rationale for recommendation is that this project is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the concurrent proposed Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment, and Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. So our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council, contingent on the approval of the concurrent Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment, approve a grant of up to $964,125 to Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to acquire a 0.2-acre parcel located at 1699 West 34th Street for Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restricted covenant on behalf of the Council. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay. Questions for Jessica?
Thanks for the pictures.
This card. I should have looked for this earlier, but if this went through, what would our balances in the different parts of the funds be?
Thank you, Chair. It's not in there, so I'm glad you asked.
I was looking for other stuff too, so yeah.
We looked the other day, and I want to say it's around 12 or 13 million, but I'm not sure if that includes the fiscal 24 legacy funds yet, because we won't bring those into the budget until September. So it's a very large pot of money right now.
Good question.
And is that the total between legacy and trust fund, or?
It is, yes.
Okay. Do we know breakdown between those roughly?
I do. I think we have roughly 5 million in RTF. and the remaining in legacy. We still have all of fiscal 23, 24 legacy funds and some of 22.
Okay. And for those who may not be familiar, part of what dictates which fund is used is what kind of stuff is on the property, because the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund has more stringent rules about the quality of natural resource land that can be acquired with it. So like this, since it had a house on it that then burned down, was removed, that kind of thing, it has to come out of the legacy stuff because it's sort of impacted by that. It's less natural. So, okay.
Mr. Chair, Jessica, does the money that is in the fund move forward and carry it over to the next year if it's unspent, or do we lose it if it's not spent?
Thank you for the question. Chair and Commissioners, the legacy funds do move forward every year. The ENRTF funds do have an expiration date.
So they expire if not used.
We can go to the legislature and ask for an extension if we have a lot left in the field that's urgent.
Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. I think the bit that we lost, I think, was a multiply extended part from a 2017 appropriation, I think. So yeah, but eventually it does go away.
Chair.
Yes, Emmett.
Commissioners, I just wanted to point out something that Jessica just covered, but we have the highest amount of balance in our acquisition funds that I've ever experienced. So we are really excited about this acquisition, and also would encourage you to speak with your agencies and encourage them if they have in holdings or other such properties that they're looking to acquire, that they move forward. And they know this, but I just want to get some things going. And I know there's a lot going on in Carver County about right now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I take your comments to heart. I move the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion from Bob for the recommendation for the staff report. We have a second for that?
I'll second.
A second from Monica. That motion is that the Metropolitan Council, contingent on the approval of the concurrent Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment, approve a grant of up to $964,125 to Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to acquire a 0.2 acre parcel located at 1699 West 34th Street for the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Discussion on that. I'm assuming not, because we just started a fiscal year, but just to get confirmation, Minneapolis Park and Rec Board is not near their limit for request from one fund.
Chair, no, in fact, this is the first acquisition we've seen from them in a few years.
I thought that was the case, but I figured we should probably mention it. The other bit I want to confirm is in terms of appraisal of the property. Since this was a recent fire, is the appraisal in fact after the date of the fire and not including a value of a house that no longer exists?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
We're sitting nods from there. Okay, good, because that would
I
otherwise.
mean, I know we're not
That'll
paying
be
for the
bad.
value of the house.
Well,
Honestly, that seems a little bit low for Marcus Scott would say.
okay. The timing of these things are such that I figured I should ask. Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, those in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. All right. That brings us on to our information items for the day. The first one of two is the Regional Parks and Trails System 2024 Competitive Equity Grant Program, a draft notice of funding availability. Go ahead again, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm just going to speak about the draft notice of funding availability for our next round of the Regional Parks and Trail System Competitive Equity Grant Program. So at a very high level, the purpose of this program is to provide funding to regional park implementing agencies for projects that advance equitable use of the regional parks and trail system. And they need to focus on one or more, preferably more, of the following: race, ethnicity, income, ability, age, or national origin. And these were focus areas that were called out in the last regional development guide. A little background on the program: we started in 2019 with a pilot program. We had $300,000 available that year in capital funds, and we received 15 applications. We were able to only fund 3 of those, and the demand really showed the council that we need to put more money towards the program. And so in 2021, we were able to dedicate $2 million to the program, which included about $600,000 in capital funds and $1.4 million in parks interest earnings. And we were able to use the interest earnings for non-capital and programming projects. And so together we funded 23 projects that were a mix of capital and non-capital. Rather than limit what kind of projects we fund by having a list of possible projects, I just thought I'd give an example of some that we have funded. So these were all funded in the last grant round. Washington County received a grant for a Parks on the Go outreach vehicle. We funded the St. Paul BIPOC Ambassador Program. Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board received funding for multicultural and multilingual advertising. Scott County started a very really cool mental health and nature-based wellness program. Ramsey County received funding for a cultural liaison for parks, and Anoka County received funding for an augmented reality trail program, which you might recall. I think they were here just a few months ago presenting that. So funding for the next grant round is very, very similar to the last round. We have $658,000 in council bonds. This is for capital projects only. Again, we have 1.4 in parks interest earnings for programming projects, and we will prioritize programming and non-capital, but if we have funds left over after that, we will use those for capital projects. And programming projects can have small capital components such as recreation equipment. The limits for the agencies will be $200,000 for capital and $200,000 for non-capitals, so a total of $400,000. And the grants need to be at least $20,000 and no more than $200,000. Here's the scoring criteria. This is the same as last time. We had really positive feedback, and we spent a lot of time really refining this for the last grant round, and so we decided to leave it alone. The 5 main categories, all equal points, are impact on equitable use, community partnerships, community engagement, capacity building, and programming initiatives. And this is in the last page of the draft NOFA if you want to reference it more closely. Our anticipated timeline for the next grant round, I apologize I left off the most important thing, which is bringing the NOFA here in October for approval. And then we'll post that right away and open web grants so agencies can start applying with an anticipated deadline of December 15th. And then council staff will have a few weeks to review those, and then we will get them to our technical review team to meet. And the technical review team will develop the funding recommendations that we bring to the council, and we're hoping to get the grant agreements out in May. This could change slightly, but we really want to give them the summer to start working on their projects. And I will add that we are looking for up to 4 MPOS commissioners to serve on that technical review team. And that would require about, first we'd have like an introduction meeting, probably an hour online, where we would just talk about the process, and then you would receive the applications. You'd have 3 or 4 weeks to review them, and then we would meet once again to develop those funding recommendations, and that could be in person or not, depending on preference of the group. It's a pretty fun, rewarding experience, I think. I believe Tony served on it and could probably speak to that. Other than that, I think that's all I have, but I'm happy to take suggestions or any comments.
Okay. Do you have any comments or questions?
I'm sure it takes a long time to do all of these, but there is a way to do it a little faster. Because I think some of those programs has to be really hard to put up, and then, May is starting to be pretty nice to start, being outside, and we don't have that many months. So I don't know if, I know you have nothing to do during the day, so of course you can do it, right? Yeah. I don't know. It seems like a little long stretch, but that would be my only advice.
You'd like to see a little bit less time pass between when applications come in and when grant agreements go out?
Yes, because then you have more time to, it's in May, but you don't know if it's the beginning of May or the end of May, and then it goes, and then the agencies has to still, okay, now we have to plan and start working on it. So you get like June to work it out, and then July, August, and September, October is too cold probably. I don't know, some of the things. Or it will just go all the way into the next year. So they will be implemented in 2025 instead of 2024.
Yeah, and we have kind of different, obviously if you have construction that happens during construction season, which does get limited by your weather, and if you have programming, a lot of that is going to target summer when we have the highest use. So if we can a little bit earlier, it sure helps. I don't know if we've had agencies weigh in on this. I will say I think we've been writing these grant agreements with a 2-year term so far.
3, actually.
3?
Yeah.
So it's not like they have to do it all within 2024.
Okay.
But of course, we're also doing things where it's like, we want you to go make a difference, so the sooner you can do that, the better. But they aren't completely constrained to just that year. 3 years, okay.
We also have all the existing grant agreements, 23 of them I think, will be expiring at the end of June.
Okay.
And so they'll be able to wrap up those projects before they start these.
All right. Makes sense.
Mr. Chair and
Yes, Bob.
Jessica, I think you have really moved this pin ahead a long way since we began this process. I have long wanted to see some money available and some effort put into building the awareness of the regional park system and its assets and benefits. And my question to you is, does this invite that kind of effort, either by one or more of the agencies individually or combined, or from the Met Council itself?
It's a good question. I hope it does. I think this programming is definitely bringing new people into the parks. Whether that increases their awareness of the system as a whole, I'm not sure. Emmett, do you have any?
I know one part to get at is I believe in the last round, decision was made to not include the council itself as a eligible recipient. But yeah, beyond that, go ahead.
Chair and Commissioners, I think that this framework for funding will support those agency efforts to increase awareness of the regional park system. The other thing that you were very persistent about during the last funding round was that you encouraged the agencies to go in on joint projects together. So I could see some agencies getting together to do promotion or awareness building, because that is one of the top barriers to participation in our system, is simply people don't know what's available. So like, I feel within the spirit of that's really a project that would be attractive. And the best way to make it attractive, Bob, would be to volunteer to be on the review committee, and then, and guess what? Up to 4 commissioners. We have 4 commissioners here tonight. What an opportunity.
Well put. But as I look at the criteria,
Yeah.
Jessica, I'm not sure that I see a home for that kind of an effort when I look at the scoring. And yet I continue to believe that building awareness and making people aware of the benefits would be one of the best things we could do to increase usage among all the different citizens. So I'm going to go back to your criteria and ask, if Carver County, we'll say, came to you and said, okay, we want a grant for $200,000 to build awareness of the parks along with Three Rivers. Okay, so with Three Rivers, we take Jonathan and his crew and Marty and his crew, and we would develop some promotional advertising for both social media and regional kinds of media efforts. Where would that fit in the criteria here?
I think that would actually fit really well because we're emphasizing partnerships.
I'm sorry?
Well, we're emphasizing partnerships, so I
Yeah.
think it would serve pretty well. We did fund the Minneapolis advertising one a couple of years ago to increase awareness. That was scored pretty high. So I think it would fit quite nicely as long as there was, you know, a true equity component to it, the targeted advertising or outreach.
I know our past ones have, said in their general text that multiple agency applications are allowed and encouraged. Have we actually received any multi-agency applications, and were any of those in what we've previously funded?
Yes, we have. Washington County and Anoka County partnered up on a Bikes to Go, or Bikes, some kind of Learn to Bike project, and they're working on that together right now. There might be more, but that's the one that I think of off the top of my head.
Sure.
We're also taking input on this now, Bob, so like we could clarify the fact that building awareness is an important feature. Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah, I think like the way it is right now, there's probably room for the review committee to give some preference to that, but it's not necessarily directly spelled out separately from some of the other things within the same category. And you were saying, do we want to actually tell them in this notice, hey, this is a bigger priority this year than it has in others?
You know, if we deal with the strategy first and then its execution, I believe the strategy of building awareness is an important element. So I posed that to the committee, and I would love to see that encouraged and welcomed in the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with Bob. Is that it's really ridiculous how people don't know what is happening. So awareness will bring more people. It's not like they need to know about, the Metropolitan Council and the system. They just need to know what is offered around where they live. But I think I do see that it could be, community engagement maybe, and you can make it in different language so it's equal.
I guess part of my question on that then, if we're looking within this table of scoring criteria, is this something you would put under engagement or under partnerships or under its own thing? And then whether it goes under one of those or something else, would you propose changing the point structure at all to reflect that change?
If you would ask me, I would say it's big enough, it's important enough to have its own heading. And community engagement, you could get there, but I think it's a step that you have to go through because you use community engagement to mean meeting people and having dialogue one-on-one in group meetings. And I think awareness is a bigger piece of the pie. And so I would say, yes, it ought to be its own category. And how we would assign points to it, I would defer to the team in terms of figuring out how to do it.
I think it's so big because it's really hard to figure out how to reach it. So is it social media? Is it a better website? Is it an app? Is it, talking to the school district. So I think on this one is the starting point of something that it has to grow new, and if it's in their own criteria, so you have an opportunity to actually do a research of how you can really make people aware of this. Like, I know Three Rivers does a great job sending emails, but you have to be on their mailing list, and not everybody knows how to do that. And if you are in French Park, maybe a lot of people don't even notice the thousands of Three Rivers, signs that are around. So, or they think it's like, oh, I don't know, there must be a river around here. Who knows? But something like that. So, yeah.
And if I can maybe put some words in your mouth, Bob, what you're getting at, I believe, is not saying for a particular project have a component addressing how to make people aware of the project, but we're looking for what sorts of projects can themselves make people more aware of the system, right?
Or the system as a whole, if it were to encompass something that maybe the council itself would apply for.
Yeah.
Or the system of Three Rivers, if you will. They may say, I want to build awareness of our park system. And so that would be a smaller hunk of the pie.
Yeah, but it's not just saying, okay, our project is to build an accessible playground, and here's our marketing plan to let people know we built a playground. It's what sort of a project drives the system.
Yeah, I think your first part, Tony, is what I'm thinking about. But I wouldn't negate if somebody said, we're going to build this fancy new pond, such as up at Elm Creek, this natural lake kind of thing, and we want to make sure people know about it as a component to their grant request. I would think that would be reasonable.
Yeah. Does that give you enough guidance on kind of what we're getting at?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And I don't know if we had a chance to go over this separately with you before today, but kind of the background of this was we had many years when we looked at the fact that most of the money available to us is for capital projects, and that comes with a particular constraint. And we were saying there's a bunch of stuff that we would like to see people do that isn't necessarily building stuff.
Right.
So this was all put together as a way to give people flexibility to do other stuff. We weren't even sure what that other stuff was. We were just like, we know other stuff needs to happen besides just building stuff. So we made it a competitive program where everything else we do is pretty much by formula except for the acquisition opportunity fund grant. This was we want to bring us your best ideas because we know that something needs to be done differently because we're not making the kind of headway on equity that we wanted to. And this was a more open-ended, let's see what you come up with kind of a thing.
Well, I love it. I also think there is something to creating more awareness about what we're doing here. I mean, that might even encourage people filling in these seats for commissioner positions and, just opening those doors a little bit more. Could cause there could be some positive things that came out of that, so, yeah.
It also wouldn't hurt the reputation of Met Council to have some awareness of some of the great stuff that Met Council's doing. So,
You're not wrong.
there's little incentive there.
Yeah, so it's,
So pretty much add another whole point and do it fast.
just more and faster. That's
Yes.
easy, right?
December 15th deadline.
I see we have a comment from our audience. I suppose we could take this if people are amenable.
It's actually a thank you.
Go ahead. Okay. We'll take those.
The staff of Three Rivers thanks you for this program. Our programming staff and our community outreach staff don't often get that many opportunities to receive grants, and they're really excited about it. I've already shared some of this information with them for the upcoming NOFO, and they're very excited about that as well. One of the big things that this has helped us do is really spread awareness of the regional park system through experiential opportunities for new visitors. And it's a word of mouth campaign in many ways. But it's been a great program, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, well then I'm going to use this as my moment to soapbox to staff a little bit. You probably know what I'm saying, which is that we have some pieces here that are getting more mature now. This is a relatively new program, and we started with some things where just try some stuff out. It would be nice to have standing policy about this grant program. We've been doing it just in these notice of funding availability things on a year-to-year basis. We probably want to make sure that that gets wrapped into our parks policy plan update. And also where the money is coming from. We've been getting some council bonds, but also this parks interest earnings account currently exists without any guiding policy. And that because there was a legislative change since the last time we did our parks policy plan update. So I know we have another information item about our parks policy plan, but we haven't seen discussion of because that has been talking about other things. We haven't yet had time for this group to give feedback on those two aspects, and we want to make sure that that happens. I know looking at our timeline, we're expecting to have things pretty locked down on the policy plan update about 9 months from now, and that's going to pass pretty quickly. So we're going to want to make sure to set up some time in the meetings in the next 4 or 5 months for discussion feedback on the equity grant program policy and talking about the interest earnings. In that policy might, for the rest of you, the interest earnings account used to be dedicated to a particular park because of historical reasons from the 80s, and that changed, and so now it's available, but we don't have anything saying what we're doing. We've been looking at it and saying, that it was dedicated to a particular park for equity-related reasons, so it kind of makes sense for us to use it for this equity program, and also it's our unrestricted funding source. But we haven't actually written down, we want to use the park's interest earnings for the equity grant program, or anything else you might be interested in, but we should probably write it down, basically. So just make sure that gets on our agenda sometime in coming months.
Thanks, Tom.
And that gets kind of into a weird crossover where some of it comes from Jessica as a funding thing, and some of it's going to come from Colin and such as a planning thing, and we have to kind of mix the two. Anything else?
Future.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
And with that segue, I go into talking about the Regional Development Guide and Regional Parks Policy Plan Update. We have a couple of people talking to us. All right, go ahead and let us know who you are and what we're talking about this week. And I'm going to go refill my drink. Go ahead.
Great. I can kick us off here with the first couple slides. And I will just say we want to update you on our collective progress on the Regional Development Guide, the big umbrella planning document that the Metropolitan Council leads. And more specifically, our progress on the Regional Parks Policy Plan update. We are working on a lot of related, exciting efforts around the Regional Development Guide and Policy Plan update. And we know you've been sort of following this along, but we just wanted to bring it along since the last time we were talking about this was maybe 2 months ago. Yeah. And we are committed to improving how we integrate our services as a Metropolitan Council. Like that's one of the things that we've heard from you, and we will talk about that. So I'll go to the next slide, Colin. Thanks. Here is a graphic that describes the sort of framework that the plan organizes under. We have, if you look at this, the Regional Development Guide is really the top 3 levels of this. The existing conditions and emerging changes, the sort of vision and values for the region, and then those cross-cutting goals that run across all of the council's services. So that's the Regional Development Guide, and that is starting to emerge and come into focus. And then within that larger context, we have all the system plans and policy plans, which includes, in the center, of course, parks policies. What else did I want to say? This is the council now has 5 cross-cutting goals, which I'll get to in just a minute. But we're really starting to get into, or we're getting enough information where we really need to start saying, okay, well, what are we going to do with these large cross-cutting goals that now we are in part responsible for advancing. So, next slide. Here are, we've covered this before with you, but here are the 4 high-level values, the how we do our work for the Regional Development Guide: equity, leadership, accountability, and stewardship. There's some reinforcement of current, our current Thrive 2040 document has these components in it. You know, when I think about these, I'm like, can the parks folks, can we work with these? And I'm like, yeah, these are values that really resonate with us. Next slide. And here we have the Regional Development Guide vision. The last time, Mike Larson, who's been here several times, he's one of our colleagues in the Community Development Division, but the last time he was meeting with the full council to discuss this, he laid out 2 sort of similar visions. One is a little bit shorter, but envisioning a healthy, just, and resilient region where future generations thrive and experience new opportunities supported by a whole host of things. We didn't make the top line there in terms of regional parks, but as I look across these 5 goals, our region is equitable and inclusive, our communities are healthy and safe, our region, I think this is going to emerge into our region's economy is dynamic and resilient. We lead on addressing climate change, and then finally we protect and restore our natural systems. You know, these are 5 cross-cutting goals that just directly intersect our parks work. So again, we can really work with this. I think with the next slide, I pass it to you, Colin.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Emmett. Again, you've seen this timeline before, like you've seen some of the previous content before. It has changed in small ways over time, but we want to remind you kind of where we are and key milestones and where we're going, of course. At the top, you can see the 4 major phases of this project. We've recently transitioned out of the initiation phase and into the planning phase. The planning phase work will continue for the remainder of the calendar year, when we'll transition into the execution phase and its focus on plan development and refinement. In March of next year, we intend to have a draft or a 60% plan complete. In August of next year, so in about a year, we intend to have a final draft or 90% plan complete. And in November 2024, after a public comment period and a public hearing, we are aiming for council approval. And even though the title of this slide is Regional Parks Policy Plan Timeline, when I refer to the public comment period and public hearing, that refers to the Regional Development Guide and the Regional Parks chapter that will be a part of it, along with the other systems and policy plans that Emmett referenced. Here is a reminder of the 7 initial agency council policy work groups that have been or will be formed to dig into the areas of express interest both by you all and our regional park implementing agency partners. Today we'll be discussing the outcomes to date of the first 2 work groups that are referenced on the top of the list: community, stakeholder, and public engagement, and Regional Parks and Trails System Vision, Mission, and Values. My colleague Chi will be providing an update on the engagement work group, and I will be providing an update on Vision, Mission, and Values. We will pause in between these topic areas and after the second one to gather your thoughts, so get ready for that. But before we get there, a few other comments about the work groups. In mid-June, we launched 2 additional work groups at the Regional Parks and Trails Planners Forum. Those are numbers 5 and 6 on this list. We're talking about park and trail long-range plan requirements and system plan considerations. The focus on these areas will continue through the summer with agency council work groups meeting next week and another planners forum to be scheduled in September. This fall and likely into the winter, we'll launch into the remaining 3 work groups, including strategic sustainable funding, recreation activities and facilities, and regional trails and regional bicycle transportation network. And now I'm going to pass it off to Chief.
Thank you, Colin. All right, so we had 2 work groups with the agencies regarding engagement. The first one happened in April. The second one happened in May. So in the first work group, these are the key takeaways that we gathered or received from our agency partners who were involved in this work group. We shared our community stakeholder and public engagement plan and community engagement tools, which is used to be, which we council staff we are using to guide us to have meaningful and intentional engagement with targeted underrepresented communities. So they had a chance to review this and provide their feedback, and we, based on the feedback received, we revised our documents and then we shared it back with the team to make sure that this is what we've heard from them, and so they are in support of this, and also we are opening this up to the agencies to use as well, as this is of course a learning opportunity for everyone, especially for the council, since our agency partners do on the ground work and a lot of the engagement work in the front end. Another key takeaway was to really understand how communities communicate, because each community, they have their own complex level of understanding of how they relay information to one another, and to really understand their cultural differences as well. And so just being more aware. And then of course, if translations, interpreters are needed to have those prepared in advance as we do these engagement. So communication is definitely key. And then transportation, really making sure that we understand if there is a need for transportation, or where we're having this location or the focus group, the engagement work being done, that they do have access to those locations, and just being more intentional of where we are hosting these engagement efforts with these communities. Next is trying to make policy easy to understand. Most times it's governmental language and it's really hard to grasp what kind of messages or we are relaying to the community. And so using plain language moving forward and trying to make it as simple as possible for the communities to understand. And then of course, lastly, the agency staff, they did a lot of work already. And they have recommended us to use their own guiding documents, such as system plans, that they've already done a lot of outreach with underrepresented communities, and utilizing those as existing data to help guide us with this policy plan update.
May I ask a question, or you?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Just so I understand, we're talking about the implementing agencies when you talk about agencies. Is that correct?
Oh, the implementing agencies, yeah.
Okay. So do we have full engagement by all the agencies here?
With the work group, there's a subset.
I'm sorry?
A subset.
Subset?
Yeah, a subset of agency staff, and then in July, we reported back to the whole partners team of this work.
Yes, Emmett?
I just wanted to take a step even further back. Bob, when we launched our work group approach with all 10 agencies, we invited participation from all agencies to all the work groups. So people self-selected which ones they wanted to be involved in. For the engagement one, I think we've got four agencies that are participating. But what we do is we build momentum with those work groups and direction, and then we bring that back to the larger partner group, because we meet regularly with all the agencies.
So the breakdown of this process was each work group was supposed to work on a particular topic. And it wasn't that there was just multiple meetings to break it down into smaller groups to talk about the same thing multiple times.
Correct.
I just think, good, I'm glad what you're doing is that. I just think that our overall program that we're working on together will be so much richer and more effective if we really get the participation of the implementing agencies. If they don't want to participate, you can't force them. But on the other hand, I want to make darn sure that what we're hearing from you is inclusive of the comments and advice, however you decide to filter it, from the agencies.
It would also be interesting to think about, so if we have a subset that are giving feedback on, so in this case, engagement stuff, are we hearing from the ones that either think for themselves that they're doing engagement really well, or other people think they're doing it really well, or are we hearing from the ones that have been struggling and are trying to piece together ways that they could do things differently, or give feedback on what the struggles are, or are we getting a little bit of both? Because that might tell us, what are we hearing? Are we hearing the, it seems to work for us, or the, what we had before didn't work for us, so this is what we really need to change?
Yeah, it would be both. Jonathan was part of this group as well, and then there was Mei Ying from Washington County.
This was here?
Yes, yes.
So Lakota, Scott County, Three Rivers, and Washington.
Yep, and then Scott County, and then
Washington, Dakota, Scott County.
Oh, yes. So yeah, a wide variety of staff who does engagement work, and others who does more of the higher management level, such as Jonathan himself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the second work group was a little bit more informal versus the first work group. This one, as you can see in the photos in the slide, we played with Legos and sort of had that lead our conversation. So all the participants, they picked a card, and each card had a community. And so someone had squirrel, the other had tree, and new immigrant. And the purpose of this playing with the Legos was to build a park for these communities. And then through that, we had a discussion of like, how would we do engagement moving forward? If these were our, the communities that we were engaging. And so the major key takeaway from this work group was the synthesis of past agency work. As you all are aware, they do a lot of the long-range planning work, and part of that's the engagement effort. And through that engagement effort, the equity analysis, of course, has been a key requirement in all the long-range planning. And so we already have this set of data, so why not utilize that data to help guide us moving forward? And so we've been in the process of summarizing and collecting all these data since the enactment of the equity analysis requirement. And I'm in the process of mapping that to the chapters of the Regional Parks Policy Plan, which has been really helpful and great feedback from the communities. And part of this is, we don't want to get the communities to the point of where they're so highly engaged to the point of fatigue. And this is one way to, prevent that. And also because we don't have the capacity to reach out to all these different communities, and why not use the data that we have to help us do that work. And then of course, we will present these topic areas and send them back to the agencies to respond to in the future. And as I was alluding to earlier, tapping into other areas of engagement, they brought up public health and community services, which those are closely tied to parks and wellness and health as well, and partnering with local community leaders in those areas. And then of course, understanding the priority groups, the underrepresented community members and their lived experiences while we're engaging them, and to being more thoughtful of our intention, asking the right questions, being strategic, and focusing in on that. And then as well, like, community members can definitely help shape the activities list in our regional parks policy plan, because it's a fairly outdated list and it doesn't match the demographics and the usage of our current system. And so part of the goal is for me and Amanda to help expand that list or come up with a policy that can be more flexible for our regional parks and trails. And that alludes to my last point, was just being very flexible as much as we can. So what's been happening? So earlier this year, as you all may remember, we held 3 focus groups, mainly focusing on the LGBTQ community with the Urban Bird Collective, Socana Fitness, and the McAllister College Student, the Outdoor Club, who our previous intern, Francesca, led the focus group. And then apart from that, we've been doing a lot of pop-up tabling at 2 different events. So Scott County, Three Rivers, in partnership with the International Walking Club, they hosted the Community and Wellness Fair, which was also funded by the Equity Grant Program at Clary Lake Regional Park. And so it was a really good outdoor event where a lot of the participants who are part of this walking club are ESL students. And their age ranged from young adults to adults. And then of course we just recently did the sign celebration with Ramsey County at Keller Regional Park with 5 signs that the local artists designed for Ramsey County. So plans for engagement, I touched on the first bullet point. We're currently synthesizing past agency work and also past engagement work that the council staff has done, such as the love letters and then Darcy's work in the youth and parks study, and then the current project where she just wrapped up the youth leaders collaboration findings. And so collecting all of this data and then utilizing that. We're hoping to do 4 in-park experience focus groups, but that may change because we already have all these, a lot of the data that we already have. But I'm currently in the process of planning a focus group with the International Walking Club, just because that's one community that we just don't hear too often from. And so I'm hoping to plan for that in early October of this year. Otherwise, we are looking forward to doing more pop-up and tabling community events, such as the Monarch Festival. It's happening early September 9th, I believe it is, on a Saturday. So we're gonna be there as well. Otherwise, there's also the council communication public comment period, which is we'll call it typically, known as a traditional engagement, where it's our typical stakeholders who already are aware of the process. And then there's the internal engagement opportunities within CD. There's the historical cultural study that park staff are leading, and then there's the LPA, the local planning assistants, where they're putting together this cohort engagement where they will be hiring consultants to do more local engagement work for the RDG overall. So tapping into that as a resource, and also learning from our colleagues in CD, because their engagement, a lot of their feedback and comments that they've received, parks has been a common theme that has been reappearing, and so learning from them as well as we move forward in our engagements. And so my question I pose to you today is, as we move forward with this engagement for the Parks Policy Plan update, what are your advices that you have for council staff? If any, or comments?
Okay. Comments, commissioners?
Something very important that you say, you don't want to make people tired of engagement. And with that say, is also, and I think it's working so far. Like you have a very diverse set of events and places where you're going, so you don't hit the same people. Because usually the volunteers is, 2%, and it's the 2% everywhere. It's in the city, in the schools, in the sports, everybody the same person, so you're gonna keep listening up same. So I like that it's moving, and I hope it keeps, checking different places, so you get, other person. And I also like that it sounds like you're doing a very good job at communicating, like simple language is the best as a second English language. It's just, some of the words is like, what? It took me a very long time to know what it was, the stewardship, and everything else makes no sense in my translation. So it's, some of the words don't even translate. You have to take it on context. So if you use simple language when you're talking in general, not just, foreign speakers, I think it will be great. Yep. And I'm not sure where, but I know September, October is the independence celebration for Latin communities in a lot of it. So Minneapolis probably has a big party. St. Paul should have a big party, and it will be a nice place to find a lot of happy Spanish speakers celebrating, and you can just make questions. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. And I do agree with the plain English, because a lot of English words don't translate directly into the native language, and I've done some translation work in the past, and it's like, what word do I use?
I know.
So it totally resonates with me.
I know Google Translate gets you this far, but it's so much that you can misunderstand on it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know if there's a breakdown of and obviously our entire policy plan is a public document, but there are probably parts of it that the average Joe cares about more than others. So have we kind of highlighted these are the ones where the audience really is professional staff versus these are ones that more people might actually be interested in knowing what our policy direction is for the region versus, I guess what you could say, implementation and execution details, and that's maybe where we're focusing more on the plain language stuff. And then the follow-up would be, if we do identify certain parts as the really high priority for that, should we consider publishing that in multiple languages?
Yeah, that's a great point about translating that into different languages. And to that too, we've already been starting to think about different formats of the policy plan, and who the users are. For this long text document, it's definitely for staff, but for the general public, it might just be a simple one page. So we're thinking of different mediums or ways to communicate and bring awareness to the public about the policy plan, that it exists, what it's doing, and why it's important. And if we go back to, here we go. So this slide, if you can see the poster, the policy is, so Amanda and I, we both, in partnership with our communication staff, we've developed these high-level posters about what policy is, what parks is, what trails are to the community, to help them, to engage them at a very high level where they don't have to go into the weeds of what policy is. And so we're already beginning to think about how the policy plan can look like at different levels of who the audience is for the policy plan, as you were alluding to.
I know there was one conversation we had in a prior update of this, maybe, or in either case, I think possibly before you were here, which was that people want to know the policy about process. So things like, okay, if a new park is going to be built and I care about some aspect of it, when do I need to get involved and who do I need to talk to? So the things that spell out stuff like, what is the Met Council responsible for versus what is the Park Implementing Agency responsible for? Possibly what is a municipality or the legislature responsible for, that kind of thing. And what are the different stages of that and where do certain things happen? Because frequently, not just us or even just parks, but government in general, people suddenly get involved when it is already a year and a half past the stage when they needed to get involved for the thing they're caring about. It's like construction equipment is breaking ground, and now they're like, whoa, 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 you didn't tell me about this. And it's like, well, that already happened. There was a thing. So how do we communicate to people, hey, if you want to keep track of stuff, here's how it works. Here's sort of the flow chart of stuff in terms of, for us, we draw a search area or a search corridor for our Parker Trail, and then we approve there being something there, but we haven't drawn boundaries yet. And then we draw boundaries, and then we determine what's going to go into the boundaries, and that's all based on feedback from the implementing agencies. That kind of stuff would be good to really focus on, because that tends to be what, if we don't do a good job of communicating that, that's what people get upset about. It's like, well, I wanted to be involved, and I didn't know how, because I didn't understand your documents about how your stuff works. So that would be one that I would definitely focus on, about really spelling out for the general public. Just anything about how our process of planning works. Not necessarily what the end result of the planning is, but how, if you wanted to be involved, here's how you do it, and when. What else? And I had a note on here where you said make policy easy to understand. I was curious, have we identified which parts aren't right now? Have people said like that sentence? Like you had an example.
But just give it to me, I can't highlight it right
Like, are there some parts that people say, yeah, this part's really good, but this chapter's terrible, or is it the whole thing is kind of a muddled mess? I'd be curious about that. Don't necessarily need to answer that. And then we were talking about using existing agencies' stuff. Can you expand a little bit of how, like what things would we use and how would it be incorporated? What does that mean?
Yeah. So a lot of, as you're aware already, our implementing agency staff, they do a lot of the engagement work already, and through that engagement work, they're reaching these underrepresented community members, and they already have that content in existing plans. Just because I used to work for the city of St. Paul, we had the parks system plan, and part of that process is they've gone through this extensive engagement process already, and they've reached like a whole host of residents within the city, and so utilizing that data to help make policy support the needs of the community, and so utilizing those data, because going back to the idea of because we've heard a lot from for example the reverse staff that they've been reaching out to the certain community, but they keep going back, but then the community is asking, well, what have you done so far? So it's just, they've been going back to certain communities for so many times and nothing has been implemented yet. And that's when the engagement fatigue kicks in. And so since they already have all these data in previous, because the comments are pretty much the same, and so since they already have these existing comments from previous plans, why not use those data to help push for better policy instead of going back out to the same community, asking the same questions, and then just repeating the whole entire process all over again.
And is this something where we're going to be kind of looking at documents from all the agencies and aggregating it and saying like, okay, out of our 10 agencies, 6 of them said this is a problem, clearly that needs to end up as a line in this, and it's ultimately going to be going into a spot in our policy plan? Or is this something where we're talking more about, well, each agency is a little bit different, so we're putting something in that like refers out to individual things?
Good question. So what I can use our equity analysis as an example. So our intern, Brooklyn, she has, since the enactment of the requirement, so 2020, so since from 2020 till now, all the long-range plans that have been approved through council, she has gone through every single plan and pulled out all the specific comments, and then she did a fabulous job of theming these comments under certain themes. And then from there, the team, the engagement team, we are mapping those specific comments to potential areas where it can make changes or impact in our policy plan, if that makes sense.
Okay, so this is basically a filtering up, taking the commonalities.
Right, yep.
As I know there's some other areas where we've been told, the agencies kind of want to have recognition of individuality, and some things that go out, but this is one where there's more things coming into the central document.
Gee, are we going after any new ethnic groups or other groups who may not have been heard from in the past, who have recently moved into our area and that we should know about?
Yeah, good question. So through the equity analysis requirements work that our intern has done, she has also gathered the demographic information as well. And so I don't remember on top of my head, but that will help us guide, or that will guide us to to see which groups are underrepresented that we do need to reach out to. So that will help us. And then one is the ESL students. They are definitely one group that we have not heard from. And the person that I'm coordinating this next focus group is with, she's really interested in having her students learn about this process, and happy that we are engaging her students to learn more and to gain their insights, because they do part of the reason why they may not go to parks is because there's not materials in their language or signage in their language, and they don't know what they can and cannot do. So that's definitely one group.
I was just realizing, I think when we're talking about the equity stuff, we've got our grant program and changes to the equity analysis for long-range plans and all that. A lot of that was in response to things that we did that almost 10 years ago now. I think Raintree's barrier study was in 2014.
Right.
It'd be interesting to know what our plans are, and should any parts of these plans be written into the policy plan, or are they separate, to follow up with that and say, like, what do we restudy or re-ask and recheck to see, are the changes that we've made in the last decade making a difference? And are there still, do we just keep doing what we're doing now, and like we did a course correction, now we're on the right course, we just have to wait for it to really do its thing? Or are there still gaps in that where we need to adjust it still, and what would inform such an adjustment if there was anything? I don't know, if that's things just from our visitor study, or if it's another targeted study engagement like Raintree did, or if it's something else entirely. Basically, how do we check our progress and know what we're doing and whether it's the right thing? And does that go into our plan, or is that sort of a separate thing? Also, you mentioned revision to the activities list, so I just want to mention to that, that's one that basically makes me nervous, because I think it's certainly true that just having a list is limiting. I would also say that I think it's appropriate to be, there to be limits. It's a question of whether the limits we have are the right limits to have, because when each of us were interviewed for this commission, we were talking about, what is sort of the distinction between the regional park system and like county and local park systems. And that's something that we've always struggled to define. It's like, the key takeaway there is I do think that there should be a distinction. It's how do you draw that line? And if it's an activity list, then we look at what's on the activity list. A lot of us have been saying, well, maybe an activity list isn't really the right way to do that. But what I want to be careful of is that we don't make it so flexible that there isn't a distinction. We do have some of our implementing agencies, pretty much all of their, I'll just say county for the moment because it's easier than 3 different things. Like almost all of the county things are also regional things in some cases. And other, maybe like for our municipalities, or Minneapolis Park Board is separate from the city, but they have a lot more things that are local and not regional. And kind of a weird blurred line. Like I do think it's appropriate for there to be things within each implementing agency that are not part of the regional system. And how do we say which those should be is going to be tricky. I don't want to make it so flexible that everything merges together. It's just, well, everything's regional. But if we need to do it something differently than just an activity list, I'm fine with that. We just have to figure out how to wordsmith that, because like before we said they like natural resource based and everybody disagrees on what the heck that means. So it'll be an interesting task for wordsmithing to come up with something that both gives the flexibility to do potentially innovative things and accommodate communities that we haven't before, while still having the regional system mean something different than just everything park related within the region's boundaries. What is the role of the regional system and how is that different will be interesting to tackle, and we'll have to look back at the regional development guide level and some statutory guidance level and some more conversation with this group, just like figure out what exactly we think our role is and how is that distinct from everything else as we address that chapter. That might be one of the harder things you have to do. Good luck.
And that's a upcoming work group with our agency partners to work on together.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, we have more slides. You want to go over those?
We sure do, Mr. Chair. We're just maybe about halfway through now. We can keep on rolling here at 5:32 p.m. But yeah, we wanted to get into some more of the work groups so far. As you know from previous engagements in this very room, Council Park staff have also been developing vision, mission, and value statements for the regional parks and trails system from an agency council partner perspective. To that end, Council Parks staff facilitated a pair of work group meetings focused on these statements, building off of the input that you all provided 2 meetings back in April. The team met twice and had pretty deep conversations that shaped the draft statements that we're excited to share with you in just a minute or two. But first, like with Chi's summary, we want to talk about some of the key takeaways from the meetings and tell you a little bit about them. So going back to that first agency council work group meeting, work group members considered the input that you provided and the input that implementing agency staff provided in preliminary surveys going all the way back to last fall, along with the work he did here in April. There was a healthy discussion as well of the council's role and responsibilities versus that of the regional park implementing agencies, as well as the unique relationship that the council and agencies have together as the partnership. There was a lot to consider, but the group was eager to dig in, and that it did. Some of the key takeaways from the meetings included, in the first here, general support for the work group approach and for developing a system-wide partnership approach to these statements, as well as to describe the council's role in it. The work group also supported a direction you suggested as well, that the vision statement should be short and inspirational. Further, these statements should be true to the definitions of vision, mission, and values, and that they should try not to duplicate one another. There might be similar messages, similar ideas therein, but that they be somewhat separate or not duplicative. And lastly, some advice specific to values. That is, that education be considered as one of the several values or core beliefs that are held in common by the partnership. Between the work group meetings, Council Park staff took the advice provided by the work group and shared updated draft statements based on what resonated with the group and what did not so much. The work group continued to offer really helpful advice that has continued to guide and shape these statements. Some of the key findings of the second work group meeting included the notion that we intentionally link the regional park and trail system vision, mission, and values to the council's vision and values, some of the things that Emmett shared earlier in this presentation, for a high-level strategic orientation. It was also suggested that we maintain both the contemporary and futuristic threads to these statements. Specific to the vision, there were 2 statements that seemed to strongly resonate with the group, and you can see those hopefully on the screen here. First, connect community inspire health and healing, and protect nature. And second, a premier system of connected, nature-based parks and trails fostering healthy people, communities, and natural systems. With regard to the mission, the group appreciated the use of words and phrases like support, partnership, and the longer interconnected nature-based system of parks and trails. And with regard to values, the group was generally on board with the set that was shared and only offered minor modifications to the descriptions of a couple of the values, that is, stewardship and education. So following those two work group meetings, Council Park staff made some minor revisions to the statements, particularly the vision and the mission. And the latest iterations were shared with the full Regional Park Implementing Agency Partnership at its June 29th meeting. First, the draft vision. Together, growing community connections and inspiring health and healing through exceptional outdoor experiences and high-quality natural areas. And the draft mission. A partnership committed to an interconnected, nature-based parks and trail system where everyone belongs. And the draft values. And here I'll just reference the underlined words and let you read the descriptions on your own. We're talking about collaboration, belonging, stewardship, well-being, adaptability, and education. And of course, I should note that these statements are not considered final, and that the agency staff on the 29th offered additional suggestions for consideration. But before we made additional modifications to these statements to share in sort of a formal way, we wanted to make sure we connected with you all and gather your feedback and your input on kind of where things stand as of that most recent partner meeting. And so that leads us to the next bit of conversation or discussion, Q&A, if you will. Do the draft Regional Parks and Trails System vision, mission, and values resonate with you? And second, kind of like the question that she posed, what advice do you have for council staff and agency staff, frankly, moving forward with this work? And so we welcome your ideas and advice. And if it's helpful, I can go back to the previous slide, which includes the language here that the work group came to prior to the last partner meeting.
Okay. Comments? Yes, Bob?
I really like the feeling of what you're getting at. It feels like the sense of togetherness with the various implementing agencies and the Met Council is a value that's worth going after, and I think it's good. Whether the wording is the wording in this one feels kind of cumbersome to me. Right? So you've played with that in the post group, but in general, I like the idea. The other commentary I had, and I haven't had a chance really to think a lot about the wordsmithing of all this, which is probably good. But one of the questions I've got in the value is that of safety. One of the things I know from my work with Outward Bound is that a lot of the minority communities don't feel safe. They question whether it's safe to be out there in that dark, unpatrolled area. I don't know how big an issue that is for us as an organization or organizations, but I'm a strong believer that those of us who set the policies and direction for our organizations like this have a responsibility for safety? And if we do, is that one of the values that should come out in a document like this?
It does mention that in one of them at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, Mr. Chair. If you look at the values you see before you, I chose not to read the descriptions, and part of that comes out, the safety portion comes out in that description of belonging there, where we talk about spaces and programming that are inclusive, welcoming, safe, and accessible to all individuals. So we see it there, and I would just point back to the shared regional goals that Emmett shared as well, and one of those is that our communities are healthy and safe. And so you might recall our last meeting in June, we were starting to encourage and thinking about how the regional vision and values, or vision specifically, would connect to our own parks policy area objectives. So now that we've got a more sort of fully formed set of shared regional goals, we can be thinking, how does our parks policy area really connect to that? And so we'll be looking at each of those goals to think about how our work connects to that as well. Sort of continuing that exercise that we were trying to have here with you back in June. So we see it in a few different places. Could we stand to strengthen that? Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that to your discretion to think about. But if we are to think back, if we were a couple of years in the past and we were setting values for the transportation system on light rail, we might not have mentioned safety. But today, if you talked about one of the values for the metro transportation system, we would say, hey, safety is paramount to us achieving any sort of success in this program. So I raise it with you because I think it's important. How you're going to present it, I don't exactly know. Yes, thank you that you have it in there. And I'll leave it at that.
I actually like that it's wrapped in next to inclusive and welcoming in this, because thinking back to that same barrier study I mentioned, we found in that being safe and feeling safe were potentially two different things. Certainly we have a responsibility for making sure people can be safe, but it's been trickier to also make them feel safe, and that they overlap, but they're not always the same. And if we just said, well, we made it so you were safe, and then like left our wording such that we thought we could stop there, that wouldn't be enough. For especially the people that are less familiar with the park system, they might not know what we're doing such that they are. So tying it into these other aspects makes a lot of sense to me, because it's more than just the things we would know to do that address the reality of being safe without necessarily how do we communicate you're safe? How do we convince you that we did the right thing? Or if we actually did a bunch of things that we thought were enough and you're telling us, no, we've analyzed it and it's really, really not, how do we find out that we missed something? So I think that bigger heading gives us a more holistic view of what it is we have to do.
I think, sorry.
I saw Tessa's hand, that'll come.
I would say you could even put it under well-being, because I think that would tie into what you're saying, Tony, about not making people, like saying we created all these safe spaces, but allowing people to feel safe, and that's important. That's something that we're thinking about in terms of their well-being. It could go there.
Well, and that's not necessarily a moving it, it's possibly saying it a second time in a different way.
Exactly, like I agree with what you said, it works where it is, but you could reiterate it again. And I don't feel like that would be repetitive. I feel like that's implying something deeper as well, and, you know, intentional.
Yeah, and that's not even necessarily about being safe in your park as it is the park contributing to being safe in your community. I don't have any idea how to word that line, but I can like see a fuzzy thing filling in there that makes a lot of sense.
Keep working.
Yeah, that's good.
I actually think it's more education. Like kind of Bob was saying, minority groups don't feel safe. Being safe is different. I mean, I don't know how we can guarantee that you're not gonna have, you're not gonna be robbed, but you're not gonna be attacked by a bear. I have no idea we can control that. But feeling safe to go in a park is part of me learning how I'm gonna go in a park and why is it that it's safe. So coming from a country where parks have, fences and that are chained and they close at 10 because it's not safe to be in it, and I grew up on this, to take it away from that thinking, you have to educate or teach me why is different here and why I will be fine. And another thing, like I'm thinking safety is a human is gonna attack me. That's the safe part in my mind. And never comes to me, it could be like, you just touch a branch and a snake bite you. That doesn't happen. But it happens here. So it's part of education, like so to change the feeling of safety to me, it will be more like educating how to behave outdoors, how to use the parks, how how we plan the system to actually me to feel okay here. Or using a kayak, how are you telling me that I can just go on it in the Mississippi River and use it for the first time ever? It's like, how deep is that thing? So it's just, just education. If you tell me, you can stand up on it and it's not a rapid river, it's like, well, maybe I could. So just a little bit of it. So
Who's telling you that? Don't listen.
it's just,
Don't stand in a kayak. No.
Well, no, not in a kayak. But if I follow the kayak and I stand up on the water, I won't be drowning. So
Okay.
yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I do know. Okay. I was worried when you
But
said
see, my
stand
point
in
is
a
like
kayak.
confusing. Yes. Yeah. So like things like that. So that would be, and then as a result, that safety will be part of the well-being and the belonging, because then I know how it is part of this group.
Well, and that goes to a sense of autonomy too. I think that would be important with creating identity in natural spaces and feeling safe and that it is a space for you. Educating people on how to feel safe or giving them the skills to feel that sense of safety and that they have some sense of control there if in need would be really important too.
One thing that jumps out to me on this is we say in our mission statement that it's a Parks and Trails system. And this ties back a bit to what Bob was talking about earlier with our awareness and things. I wonder, what is it that makes it a system separate from just a collection of park implementing agencies? And we've talked about this a bit before. I forget what the context was, but there's some sort of overlap and like level of consistency in what you can expect of, okay, if I'm going to a regional park, it's going to have this kind of stuff and offer this kind of experience, while understanding that there's going to be a bunch of differences, like, okay, maybe this one has a lake, this one doesn't, this one has kayaking, this one has hiking, this has nature center, doesn't. But what is it that makes that top level, these are the things that we can know are true, that if you walk in somewhere and there was no signage, you'd be able to say, that's a regional park, that's part of the metro system. Or going from the other way, knowing, okay, if I want to have this kind of experience, I know I can get that at anywhere in the system, maybe with different activities. But what is the consistency layer? And then is there a way to call that out in our values stuff? And that ties also into a bit of our role conversations and that sort of thing. But saying, okay, if we're saying we're a system that's more than just the partnership, we call it the partnership part, but system implies more than just partnership. And what is it that makes the system, and how do we recognize that in these then value bullet points? I don't know the answer to that. I just know to raise it. If anyone else knows the answer to that, let us know.
And in the package on the page number 10, I have more options for the vision and the mission statement. The ones that you were mentioning that were made in July, these are June, right?
Yeah.
So going back to simple talking, I think the vision, the second one, exceptional outdoor experience and high quality natural areas for all, is clear, easy to understand for everyone. And because the other ones is an interconnect system of nature very spark. I get it, but it's a little, not that fluent, yes. And then on the mission, I like the last one because it's also, clear to grow and nurture healthy natural systems, community connection, and personal well-being in nature-based parks and trails. So I do think the word system is kind of tricky because system, what do you mean by system? System is like a body of agency or offices or people working, or it's like a organic system, like how the tree roots work system. Or so system is like a fancy word, but I don't know another option for it. Yeah. So just think about it. You got it.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Bob.
Thinking about Tony, about what you were saying, I mean, what comes to my mind is the sense of wayfinding and having some commonality between parks systems that would be consistent across all of the implementing agencies. It's just an avenue, but it's one that is attractive to me. When I think about some of the national highway systems that have commonality of the Yellow Brick Road or Route 66 or some of those things that run through, and I know we have some of that in some of the systems. Just that popped in my head when we were talking about it.
And I know some of our implementing agencies have just recently had projects to have commonality of wayfinding even within their own agency. So we're kind of catching up on that. But yeah, that's something that would be a relatively low-hanging fruit of you don't necessarily change anything about it, but just the way maps look, the way signs look. Your logo is here, but then some layout thing is the same. Could go a long way. I don't know if that would be at this level of stuff, that's a further implementation detail, but some sort of bullet of,
Just came
some
to my
basic
mind.
commonality.
When I look at number 7 on the policy plan work groups, talking about the regional trails and regional bicycle transportation effort, that sort of floated in my mind.
Yeah.
And that will be a work group and a topic area to come, to be sure. And there are examples out there like the Grand Rounds in Minneapolis or the St. Paul Grand Round that have some of that common wayfinding that when you're on the Grand Rounds or St. Paul's Grand Round, where you are and what you're sort of experiencing.
And trails are a great example of that kind of thing. Of if you're on one continuous piece of pavement, but it crosses a jurisdictional boundary, that should not feel weird. Whatever, like I was on the same trail. Why did everything change? Or that kind of stuff. And then also it's like, okay, if I encountered a pothole on the trail, who do I tell? How do I find that out? Right now, that's suboptimal. Yeah. Anything else?
Looks good. I like it. Keep working.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
We have just I think one more slide, and then we'll be done. Just wanted to give you a real quick glimpse into sort of the near-term next steps, and really that's just the two that you see at the bottom. We are in that green shape there, rectangle. Today we were discussing, of course, draft vision, mission, and values, and draft engagement plan and associated work. We intend to return to our Regional Park Implementing Agency partnership at the end of this month. I mentioned it earlier, we intend to have another Regional Parks and Trails Planners Forum, an opportunity to discuss the items that you see at the top under June 15th, the Park and Trail Plan requirements, system plan considerations, and again, a hope that we'll be able to return to this space likely in October to then give you an update on those two new work group areas and potentially an update on what you heard today as well. So those are the plans. I think that's what we've got for you for now. Of course, on behalf of myself, Chi Yang, and Emmett, we thank you for your time and participation today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
I think one bit of feedback I would have for staff is we'll probably not quite there yet, but soon we're going to want to start having a breakdown of what we're expected to cover on the policy plan on a like per meeting basis. So like in January we're going to cover this, in February we're going to cover that. Two reasons for that. One would be there are some things that we might, as commissioners, want a little bit more time to stew over in our heads to come into the meetings prepared. You know, we have our agendas go up, you know, maybe a week ahead of time, and there might be some things that we want to think about more and know what we're coming into. And then the other part would be just to make sure that everything is getting covered. And is there anything that commissioners want to make sure that we talk about that maybe wasn't on staff's radar? Or also if we just want to look at it and go, oh, that looks really packed, I'll bet that's going to be an hour and a half conversation on its own. I remember, I think not in the last one because that was just system plan. The last time we really got into policy, I think we had some months where there were 2 meetings in a month, and we might want to see, is that something that we think is going to be necessary at some point or not? So as we get into the sub 1 year left before deadline, we're going to want that kind of backtracked, laid out per month so we can spot, is there stuff we need to plan around? And also potentially also, hey, how is that going to roll up to our appointments process? Because there's definitely some pieces of this that I want to make sure we have a fuller delegation without the vacancies and seats. So there's stuff we can talk about now, and if we had anything that was about to fall like next month that it goes saying, maybe we could really do that later. I don't know if there's anything like that, but it'd be good to be aware if there's anything that's going to fall in that category. So I don't know how well you can plan out that far, but we probably are getting near the point where we need that level of detail. Yep.
You should plan some vacations.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
All right. So that brings us on to our reports. I think I kind of started to meld into mine because my report would probably be that we're probably need some more detail coming up to make sure on that. And then the other thing is obviously the appointments process, which Emmett is going to give some more detail on. But we'll definitely want to have that filled in for some of these because these are big conversations. It would be nice if we actually had all of our districts represented for it. I don't think I have anything else. No. Other commissioners? Anything to report?
Three Rivers finished the mini golf at Eagle Lake. You should go and try it. And the last 2 weeks in August, they are doing again the outdoor escape the room for 13 and older. I think that's super fun. So. Yeah. It's in Mississippi Gateway Park. So.
Okay. Is it to escape? You have to come up with some ideas for policy planning.
I have no idea. It's like Discover and Hunt, but we could try that. See, that would be a fun meeting.
It would run like
It's nobody can go home until this chapter is written.
Yeah. Find systems, in another word.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, liaison's not here. Staff, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair and Commissioners. As Tony just said, since we last met, Lisa and I went and talked to our Office of General Counsel about the whole redistricting process. Redistricting is done every 10 years after the census, and to be frank, I didn't know a lot about the impacts. Tony knew more, I have to admit that. But the entire commission is up for reappointment, including Tony. All members are currently serving in an at-large capacity. So sort of like you've transcended your districts, good work. We are strongly encouraging all members to reapply for their for their districts. And if you be reappointed, you'll just continue in the term you currently find yourself in. So that schedule's the same. We're in the process of publishing all the vacancies at the Secretary of State's website. Currently, just districts D through H, D, E, F, GH, okay. Because there's one from the old district, because Portes got moved into District C. Yeah, sorry. I will notify you when it's time to reapply. I can actually give you your old applications to sort of facilitate the reapplication process. We're looking to do recruitment this month, September, maybe October, depending on how our recruitment process goes. We will go for the interview process and reappointment. The appointments committee will be composed of council members. They'll screen and review candidates. The full council is charged with reappointing members. So that was what we learned. If I missed anything, Lisa, please fill me in. No, that's pretty good. Okay, so stay tuned. We're figuring this out, and but it's going to be a smooth process. So just once again, I really encourage you to reapply for your seats. I wanted to just reiterate what Jessica said about the notice of funding availability. We are looking for 4 commissioners, up to 4 commissioners to serve on that. We'll make it easy to participate and really have there's going to be one prep meeting and then one decision or discussion and decision meeting. If you have questions about it, ask Tony or Jessica. Tony was on past ones. And then the most important report I have is in this month's Arboretum newsletter, Bob and his wife are featured. They donated a kind of a little rest stop along the Highway 5 Regional Trail. So it's pretty cool and a really nice commemoration for Bob's son, Mark, who's passed away. So check it out online or come read my copy that Bob just gave me. But I actually saw that before this evening's meeting. So that's it. Thank you.
So if you're looking at doing interviews potentially into October, I imagine that would mean probably council action in November. So seating and swearing in of new appointees would be at our December meeting most likely? Or do you think it can be any earlier?
If it could be earlier, we'll make it earlier, because I think December's too long, but I know you're speaking to the reality and process that probably will transpire. So
we would like November, but it probably will be December. That's basically what it is.
Lisa nods, I agree,
Okay.
because I'm not done.
Because that ties into in terms of what we're discussing, what's our agenda, knowing that we'll likely have everybody for December is useful.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So Tony, what you're saying is if we have to come 2 times per month, wait until January, so we're already here, not do it before, then we're
Well, fall's tricky anyway, so yeah, because like in November you've got Thanksgiving and stuff, so and then there's Christmas and who knows what else. So yeah, it would likely be in the spring anyway because of the level of detail we're getting into. It's when you're getting into the really nitty gritty of each chapter that kind of thing happened. But I don't know if there was anything else that might come up just in terms of not more meetings, but maybe more depth on a particular thing before then. Just be aware.
I got one question. Emmett, with the politics that are going on regarding the Met Council's configuration and method of appointment and so forth, is there anything that we should be doing differently in this 2050 plan that anticipates some possible changes in the way the Met Council is chosen? I don't have any idea what that would be, but I'm only saying there's a lot of flurry going on around us here. And is there anything that we might do differently? And the answer may well be no. But if there is, we should at least talk about it, think about it. I'm sure you guys have.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that we were thinking about how redistricting appointments of us works is dependent directly on that question because our districts are just formed from council districts. And I don't know that there's anything that we can, and because we have no idea what they're going to do, so I don't know if we can anticipate and do something, but there might be some things where we want to just be in touch with the commission that's considering that and so they know, beside the council itself, by the way, there's these other advisory commissions, and here's what the impact of some possibilities would be on us. And I don't know if we have any suggestions for it, but just know, like, if you do this, that would be how this would work, and if you do this, this is how we would work. Because there are some things like this whole bit where we're expiring and being reappointed, otherwise midterm is kind of awkward, and maybe there's some opportunities for that to become less awkward somehow, I don't know. But I see Lisa's here, what do you have to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, it's a good question, and we're always tracking. There's kind of a regular simmering of council governance conversations. And over the entire time I've been at the council for the last 15 years, they kind of bubble up from time to time and get more boiling point and then simmer again. But certainly I think when it comes to 2050 planning process, what we really are thinking about is doing what our directive is under the law and doing it to the best of our abilities, really. And so the engagement efforts that our staff are doing are really meant to be more expansive than just what the letter of the law is, but really the intent of that work of addressing regional issues and working with our partners to do that together. So really just doing our best at that. There's a lot of things governance level that are really around should the council members be appointed or elected that are not likely to trickle down to anything else. It's really about how those members are selected. But then other governance models that they're considering have different impacts, but we'll have to have deeper research. And that includes things, I think one thing I saw in the legislation was whether the responsibilities and duties of the council should be just spread out amongst various other agencies, state and local governments. Obviously that would have an impact on this commission and the role of this type of work, but that would need to have, as part of that task force responsibility, in-depth analysis of what those impacts would be. Out of all of the things that they're required to review, that's the one that's likely to have the largest impact, but that doesn't mean that will result in that being the selected choice. So we'll definitely keep you up to date as we hear things. The task force is a recommending committee. It would still require legislative change in upcoming sessions anyway. So we will definitely keep you informed of how that works and should be happy to share information that comes out of that task force.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Good question.
well, with that, I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody.